Hey everybody, it's me, Randy Ray, host of The Literate Texan. Welcome back to Driftwood Ranch. Tonight I've got a video for you about my latest book haul, which is an epic book haul. I'm saying it's my most epic book haul ever because, frankly, it's got more books in it than any book haul that I can remember ever having had for myself. And when I say it's a book haul, it doesn't mean that I bought these all at once down at Recycled Books and Records because, as many of you know, I'm not able to get out for that long a period of time. I'm having to stay off my feet because of an injury I sustained not long ago. This is a book haul that came in through the mail. And while all of these were bought and ordered on the same day, they were not all shipped and received on the same day. But they're all here now, and I'm ready to talk about them. So I'm just going to go through them one by one, as I often do with a book haul, talk a little bit about each book. The first one is Bernard Malamud, The Natural. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing Malamud correctly there or not. If I'm mispronouncing his name, please correct me down in the comments. But The Natural is a novel about a baseball player named Roy Hobbs, who's played in the movie, which is wonderful, by the way. He was played in the movie by the great Robert Redford. Now, and it's got an all-star cast. There's a lot of great actors and actresses in it. Off the top of my head, there's Wilford Brimley. There's also Kim Basinger. And there's a whole bunch of other famous people in various roles, major and minor. So if you've never seen the movie, I recommend seeing it. I've had many people tell me that the novel is even better than the movie. I just want to read a little bit off the first page here for you. I thought, it's interesting. When I first bought this and I opened it up, I looked in here. You got this page here, and I don't know if you can see it very well, but it almost looks like it's autographed. But this is not an autograph. This is actually kind of a drawn illustration here. So, it would be cool if I accidentally got an autographed copy of this by mistake or by accident. That's just not what happened. So, okay, page 1, paragraph 1. Roy Hobbs pawed at the glass before thinking to prick a match with his thumbnail and hold the spurting flame in his cupped palm close to the lower berth window. But by then, he had figured it was a tunnel they were passing through, and was no longer surprised at the bright sight of himself holding a yellow light over his head, peering back in. As the train yanked its long tail out of the thundering tunnel, the kneeling reflection dissolved, and he felt a splurge of freedom at the view of the moon-hazed western hills bulked against night, broken by sprays of summer lightning, although the season was early spring. Lying back, elbowed up on his long side, sleeping still despite the lulling train, he watched the land flowing and waited with suppressed expectancy for a sight of the Mississippi River 1,000 miles away. Okay, so that isn't like the gripping opening of some kind of thriller or anything like that. I'm not thinking, oh God, I got to read the next page. But it is beautifully written. And it does make me want to read more because I just want to see what else is going on in this novel that's beautifully written. That's the first one. That's number 1. The next one, The Natural I'm reading this summer for Summer of Sport, which is a great event. I'm not going to get into too much detail about the event, Summer of Sport, but let's just say, as the name implies, sometime over the summer, you got to read a book about sports. Doesn't matter if it's fiction or nonfiction. I don't believe we have any prompts this year, although I could be wrong. I'll double check some of the announcement videos. But if you read a book about sports, then you can say that you participated in the Summer of Sport on Booktube, which is a cool event to say you participated in. Last year, I only read a couple of books for Summer of Sport. The one that I remember most was Ron Shelton's The First Church of Baseball, or The Church of Baseball, which is his account. He was the writer and director of the movie Bull Durham, which in my opinion is one of the greatest movies of the 1980s. And it's also probably the greatest sports movie ever made. Absolutely wonderful movie. If you haven't seen it, you should. The book, and of course I'm comparing apples to oranges here, but the book I didn't enjoy as much as the movie, but I enjoyed it almost as much as any book I read last year. It was definitely in my top 10 books of 2024 that I read. So if you get a chance to read The Church of Baseball, check it out. The next book in this particular book haul is called On Boxing, which is written by Joyce Carol Oates. She was a journalist who loved boxing, and she wrote essays about boxing matches that she went to. So this is a work of nonfiction as opposed to The Natural, which is a work of fiction. It's a novel. but I'm still going to do the same thing with it. I'm going to read, the first paragraph of the first page just to give you a taste. And I do this because I like to let these books speak for themselves. Anything I say about them is going to be inadequate in the face of actually letting them speak for themselves. And this chapter opens with a quote. "It's a terrible sport, but it's a sport. The fight for survival is the fight." Rocky Graciano, former middleweight champion of the world. They are young welterweight boxers, so evenly matched they might be twins, though one has a redhead's pallor and the other is a dusky-skinned Hispanic. Circling each other in the ring, beneath the glaring lights, trying jabs, tentative left hooks, right crosses that dissolve in midair or turn into harmless slaps. How to get inside, how to press an advantage, score a point or two, land a couple punches, or land a single punch. It seemed they have forgotten all they've been trained to do, and the Madison Square Garden fight crowd is getting noisy, derisive, impatient. Time is running out. Those two, what did they do? Wake up this morning and decide that they were boxers? A man behind me says in disgust. He's dark, nattily dressed, neat trimmed mustache, and timid glasses. A sophisticated fight fan, knows all the answers. 2 hours later, he will be screaming, "Tommy, Tommy, Tommy," over and over in a paroxysm of grief as, on the giant closed-circuit television screen, lowered over the ring, middleweight champion Marvelous Marvin Hagler batters his brash challenger Thomas Hearns into insensibility. Wow, that's great. I'm really looking forward to reading this summer. That's going to be wonderful. This next book is by A.S. Byatt. This is called Possession, okay? This is, I'm actually reading it right now, but I'm reading it fairly slowly. Possession is a book that I'm reading as a buddy read with Brandy, the book eclectic. She's read it before. This is my first time. But she absolutely loved it and was really excited that I wanted to get a copy of it and read it with her. So it's a novel, and there's a poem at the beginning of it. I'm just going to read the poem, but not the first paragraph, okay? And forgive me if the poetry reading isn't as great as you expect my poetry readings usually to be. Actually, if you've seen my poetry readings before now, you will not expect it to be great at all. But I'm going to give it a shot anyway here, okay? So it says, and Victorian poetry is one of the themes of the book. It's about a couple of scholars of Victorian literature. So you're going to see a lot of Victorian poetry throughout the book, I suspect. I've only read a chapter of it so far. Okay. Those things are there. The garden and the tree, the serpent at its root, the fruit of gold, the woman in the shadow of the boughs, the running water and the grassy space, they are and were there. At the old world's rim, in the Hesperidian grove, the fruit glowed golden on eternal boughs, and there the dragon laden crisped his jeweled crest, scraped a gold claw, and sharpened a silver tooth, and dozed and waited through eternity until the tricky hero Heracles came to his dispossession and the theft. And it says that's credited to Randolph Henry Ashe from the Garden of Proserpina, 1861. I don't know if that's a real poem or not. Well, it is a real poem. I don't know if it was really written in 1861 by a real Victorian poet or whether it's just part of the background of the novel. I'm not sure exactly. It's nice, though. I can tell you from reading the first chapter of this novel, it's not particularly dense or difficult or anything like that, but this is not a fast-paced, I'm going to read 100 pages an hour novel like you might find in genre fiction. This is serious literature looking for a serious reader who's going to pay some attention to it. So I'm excited about Buddy reading this with Brandy. Brandy at the Book Collective is one of my favorite people to do buddy reads with. I've done more buddy reads with her than just about anybody. We have really similar tastes in the books that we want to read, although we occasionally have different opinions about them once we've read them. Okay, so this is also another book that I picked up for an event, and I already had a copy of it, but I couldn't find it. It's Travels with Charley in Search of America by John Steinbeck. And another event that I'm participating in this summer is the Summer of Steinbeck. The main part of the Summer of Steinbeck, the meat of it, is that in June we're reading The Grapes of Wrath, and then in July we're reading East of Eden. So we're going to do like a compare and contrast of his two, I guess those are his two biggest and most important novels. Although I don't know, I guess The Winter of Our Discontent, his final novel, is also pretty big and important. But I'm personally working my way through John Steinbeck's entire works, including his short stories. I had a teacher who was important in my reading life as a young man when I was in 8th grade. But my 8th grade reading teacher was a wonderful lady named Mrs. Hastings. And her favorite writer was John Steinbeck. And her enthusiasm for John Steinbeck was contagious. And as a result, one of the first adult novels that I ever read was The Grapes of Wrath. And I was probably 13 years old when I read The Grapes of Wrath. And yeah, there was some pretty adult material in there for a 13-year-old. Some of it I didn't know whether to snicker at or to be grossed out by, or to just say, hey, I don't understand what's going on here. But anyway, I like Travels with Charley because it makes for a nice double feature with another book that I've got here in this book haul. I had a wonderful camping trip many, many years ago. I want to say it was the mid to early 90s. So yeah, this was probably about 30 years ago. But me and a bunch of my buddies went camping at Turner Falls in Oklahoma. And at that time, Turner Falls was not nearly as crowded as it is now, especially not if you went in the off season. We went in the late fall, so it was really, really cool outside. But my schedule was such that I was off a day earlier than everybody else. And so I got to the campsite before everyone else did. And I brought some books along to read because I think there's few things in life more enjoyable than being by yourself outside reading a book. And I took a double feature along with me. I took Travels with Charley in Search of America, and also Zen in the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by Robert Persick. And I still maintain that this is a great double feature. But Steinbeck, man, what a stylist, man. His writing is just so terrific. So here's the first paragraph in here, just to give you a taste, all right? When I was very young and the urge to be someplace else was on me, I was assured by mature people that maturity would cure this itch. When years described me as mature, the remedy presented was middle age. In middle age, I was assured that greater age would calm my fever. And now that I am 58, perhaps senility will do the job. I love this opening paragraph. This is great. I still remember it. Nothing has worked. 4-horse blasts of a ship's whistle still raise the hair on my neck and set my feet to tapping. The sound of a jet, an engine warning up, even the clopping of shod hooves on pavement brings on the ancient shudder, the dry mouth and vacant eye, the hot palms and the churn of stomach high up under the rib cage. In other words, I don't improve. In further words, once a bum, always a bum. I fear the disease is incurable. I set this matter down not to instruct others, but to inform myself. The guy likes to travel. What can I say? Great book, wonderfully written. I've read it before. I don't know how many times I've read it before, but I know I've read it more than once. I've probably read it 2 or 3 times. But I did a little more rereading of certain favorite books of mine when I was a younger man, when I was in my 20s. So it's probably been 20 years since I've read Travels with Charley. So I'm really looking forward to revisiting it this summer. Next, Angle of Repose by Wallace Stegner. This was winner of the Pulitzer Prize. Okay? And one time I was working my way through all the Pulitzer Prize winners. I didn't get very far. Kelly over at Books I'm Not Reading likes to tease me because I said I like Pulitzer Prize winners. But then when we talked about the books that I've read, she looked over my Goodreads account. She said, you know what? You might like Pulitzer Prize winners, but I don't think you're as serious about getting through them as some people. And maybe I'm not. I'm kind of a slow reader, and I'll also easily distracted with a lot of different interests. But Angle of Repose, like I say, it's a novel by Wallace Stegner. I'm not entirely sure who recommended this to me, but someone did. I don't know much about it other than it's supposed to be really good. Okay, and this is from section 1, Grass Valley. Here's the first paragraph. Now, I believe they will leave me alone. Obviously, Rodman came up hoping to find evidence of my incompetence. Though how an incompetent could have got this place renovated, moved his library up, and got himself transported to it without arousing the suspicion of his watchful children ought to be a hard one for Rodman to answer. I take some pride in the way I manage all that, and he went away this afternoon without a scrap of what he would call data. That first paragraph is so good, I want to read the next one. So tonight, I can sit here with the tape recorder whirring, no more nosily than electrified time, and say into the microphone the place and date of a sort of beginning and a sort of return. Zodiac Cottage, Grass Valley, California, April 12th, 1970. All right, I don't know what it is about that I like so much, but I absolutely love it. I want to know who Rodman is. I want to know what he's recording, this guy, I want to know what Zodiac Cottage is. I've got a lot of unanswered questions that this book's already aroused in me, and it's beautifully written, the rhythm and stuff. That was great. Can't wait. So, I mentioned Kelly at Books I'm Not Reading. She and I have a buddy read plan this year, and actually we have a buddy read plan starting next week. We're reading The Weird Sisters, a novel by Eleanor Brown. Now, I've read this once before. I don't remember much about it, other than the plot has to do with 3 daughters of a Shakespeare professor. And the whole family loves Shakespeare so much and have heard Shakespeare quoted so often that they often quote Shakespeare to each other. And that's basically all I remember about it, other than I really liked the book the first time I read it. I think I read it about 10 years ago. So here we go. Chapter 1. Cordy, okay, so I guess that's a character named Cordelia. I think they're all named after Shakespeare characters. Cordy had never stolen anything before. As a matter of pride, when our friends were practicing their light-fingered shuffles across the shelves of Barnwell stores in our teens, she had refused to participate, refused even to wear the cheap earrings and clumsy lipstick or listen to the shoplifted music. But here, she was in this no-name desert town, facing off against the wall of pregnancy tests, knowing full well she didn't have the money to pay for one. A Wild West shootout, Cordy versus the Little Pink Sticky at high noon. Okay, I like it. Looking forward to it. Also doing a read here with a group of people. The one that I'm most familiar with and best acquainted with is Alan Mahan. John Berryman, The Dream Songs. It's a book of poems. I don't normally, this will be the first time that, and I guess this isn't a buddy read, it's just a reading group. It's just a little club. But this will be the first time I've read a book of poems as part of a group, except for my own book club, the Lone Star Book Club, where we're reading the sonnets as part of it and stuff. So, let me see what we've got here. And this is great because, I've talked about this before. In my opinion, poems are poems because of how they sound. So if you really want to read a poem, you should read it out loud. Okay? And I had somebody correct me on that in the comments the other day. And I guess there's no wrong way to read. But I think if you're reading a poem silently, you're reading it the wrong way. That's okay. You can disagree. It's not going to bother me at all. Okay, so here's the first page here. Huffy Henry hid the day. Unpleasable Henry sulked. I see his point. A trying to put things over. It was the thought that they thought they could do. It made Henry wicked in a way. But he should have come out and talked. All the world, like a wooden lover, once did seem on Henry's side. Then came a departure. Thereafter, nothing fell out as it might or ought. I don't see how Henry, pried open for all the world to see, survived. What he has now to say is a long wonder the world can hear and be. Once in a sycamore, I was glad all at the top, and I sang hard on the land. Where's the strong sea, and empty grows every bed. And that's the whole poem. Didn't have a title listed, so I guess Huffy Henry Had the Day is the title, because often when they don't have a title, you just go by the first line. So there's probably a lot to say and a lot to think about and a lot to analyze here. I'm not going to get into a deep analysis here because, man, I'm just showing off my most epic book haul ever. This isn't about me reading and analyzing poems. Okay, so I'm a big fan of Richard Rousseau. This is another project that I've been working on for a while. I posted a video a couple of nights about reading projects that I'm considering embarking upon. And I don't know that I went into a lot of detail about reading projects that I'm already involved in. But one of those reading projects is to read the complete works of Richard Rousseau. He wrote a novel called Nobody's Fool, which was made into a terrific film starring Paul Newman. But anyway, he had a new book. It just came out the other day. It's a collection of essays. It's titled Life and Art, Richard Rousseau, best-selling author of Somebody's Fool. Nobody's Fool was followed by Anybody's Fool and Somebody's Fool. And this is a collection of essays. So, you know what? I'm getting a lot of nonfiction in this year, which is unusual for me because I generally stick with a lot of fiction. And I'm going to slip into a lot of genre fiction soon because I talked with a new friend tonight and I got real intrigued talking about science fiction, fantasy, and certain subgenres of fantasy that I really like sword and sorcery. But here's from the first page. This is an essay titled Stiff Neck. The call is one we've been expecting, so when it comes, we're jolted but not surprised. It's from my wife's sister who lives in Arizona. She and her husband are both proudly unvaccinated, predictably enough, since their chief sources of information are Fox News and social media. They've believed from the beginning that the coronavirus has been overblown by mainstream media and that doctors are in on it because they somehow get paid more when they record the death of somebody who died in, say, a car accident as having been caused by COVID-19. Though how exactly that would work, my relatives don't explain. For them, the vaccines are not about public health so much as personal freedom. My body, my choice. And they've made them. Okay, he gets right into the COVID thing. You know, there's an interesting conversation going on in the comments over at Criminale. He reviewed the latest Stephen King novel. And there are a few people in the comments there talking about how one specific commenter called me out and said that I missed the point. That since 2016, Stephen King has been hammering us over the head with his politics in his books. I haven't felt that way. I had mentioned that I think, if a writer has certain politics, they should go ahead and include them in the book. And, if you don't have the same value system, which usually equates to having different politics, and you don't enjoy reading their work, that's cool. Let the marketplace speak for itself. I don't see a lot of need for caterwauling and being upset. But this also, I haven't noticed over the last 9 or 10 years that Stephen King's books have been any more political than they were before. Now, his Twitter feed, that's another ballgame, but everybody's Twitter feed is full of politics this day. You'll notice I'm not really on Twitter, and I'm never going to start calling it X. I don't care what Elon Musk does. I thought that was crazy to take a business that was relatively thriving under a brand name that had been building for several years called Twitter and changing the name to X. That's just ego. But I guess when you've got as much money as Elon Musk, you don't really have to worry about such things, do you? So here's a book by Nelson DeMille, The Gold Coast, which I also got in this batch. It's a really thick book. And I think there's some kind of big book project going on this summer. And I don't know all the details since it's not one of the ones that I'm co-hosting. I barely know the details of the events that I am co-hosting. But let's see how many pages this is. I'm really curious. Okay, looks like there's over 700 pages here. So that's a big one. All right, so what's this all about? I don't know. This is another one that was recommended to me. but I don't remember who recommended it or why. But I think Nelson DeMille might be an adventure writer. This might be an adventure tale of sorts. Chapter 1, I first met Frank Bellarosa on a sunny Saturday in April at Hicks Nursery, an establishment that has catered to the local gentry for over 100 years. We were both wheeling red wagons filled with plants, fertilizers, and such toward our cars across the gravel parking field. He called out to me, "Mr. Sutter? John Sutter, right?" Okay, that's a good enough start for me. Especially, I don't remember who made the recommendation or why they made the recommendation, but I do remember that it was an enthusiastic recommendation, that they were really excited that I should read this. And based on the first paragraph, combined with that sense of enthusiasm, I'm excited to read the book. So I've also got a copy of a book that I used to have a copy of, but I sold it when I sold my library a couple of years ago. About 10 years ago, I went completely broke. The alcohol and drug use had gotten out of hand over the 10 years previously, and I went completely broke, which is really sad if you consider how much money I had at the time, but I don't want to get into all that. At any rate, this was part of my collection at the time, and it got sold with the rest of my collection so that I could make the rent. This is called Federation by Judith and Garfield Reeves Stevens. Okay? And this came out at a time when, this was before Generations came out. And nobody quite knew what was going to happen in terms of the Star Trek franchise moving forward. But it didn't seem likely that there were going to be any crossovers. In fact, I think it was kind of forbidden by the producers to have crossovers. But I know this about Judith and Garfield Reeves Stevens. These guys understand the canon and the in-universe stuff about Star Trek probably as well or better than anyone else. They also co-authored the Shatnerverse novels, which gives them a special place in my heart. Okay, so prologue, On the Edge of Forever. All right, On the Edge of Forever tells me this is going to have something to do with the city on the edge of forever. I read this when it came out, but it was like 30-something years ago. Okay, it says Ellison Research Outpost. Ellison, nice little Easter egg there. Harlan Ellison wrote the original screenplay to City on the Edge of Forever. Stardate, 9910.1. Earth Standard equals late September, 2295. Kirk knew his journey would be ending soon. That's a paragraph all by itself there, okay? That's a great paragraph too. Kirk knew his journey would be ending soon. But I'm going to go ahead and give you another paragraph so you have something to look forward to here. By the way, the Reeves Stevenses wrote my favorite Star Trek novel, which was Prime Directive. A+ right there. That feeling overwhelmed him even as he resolved from the transporter beam and felt the gravity of this world reassert its hold on him. A hold it had never once relinquished over all the years, all the parsecs, which had passed from that first time to now. All that had happened since that first time was but a heartbeat to him, as if his life were dust streaming from the tail of a comet, without mass, without consequence, measured only by the moment he had first arrived at this place and by the moment of his return. And if you've seen the episode, and I'm sure you have if you're a Star Trek fan, and probably a good percentage of the people who watch my videos are Star Trek fans, you know that the city on the edge of forever is really important for Kirk because, that's how and when he met his one true love, Edith Keeler, who's played by Joan Collins. Yeah, great episode, very emotional. Anyway, it's going to be a good book. From what I recall, there's not an actual team up here, okay? You don't have Kirk in charge of one enterprise and Picard in charge of the other enterprise, and they're teaming up to fight with Commander Cruge and Khan on their two ships. They just kind of are aware of each other's presence briefly at the end. It's a little bit of a cheat in terms of a team up, in terms of the cover art, but it was still a really good book. Y'all have to forgive me. I get dehydrated really easily because of the medications that I'm on, so I'm having a sip now and then. This is called Eureka and is written by William Diehl, author of Primal Fear. I believe this is some kind of thriller novel, recommended by the same person who recommended these other books that I can't remember who recommended them. 1945. If you're a cop, the best thing you can hope for is to have a partner like Ski Agassi. That and a beautiful lady who loves you. I was thinking about both. lying on my hospital bed, watching morphine drip into my arm. It started as a small bubble, very slowly, turned into a teardrop, then silently fell into the tube. I was concentrating on that process, wondering how long it would take for that drop to weave its way through my veins and into my brain when the doctor came in. Nice, I like it. I believe William Dietz. Okay, so it's about a cop, so it looks like this is crime fiction. And there ain't nothing wrong with crime fiction if it's well written, right, folks? So this one I'm really excited about, and this was actually kind of hard to find. This is the Economist book of obituaries. And I found this recommended in a column from Michael Dirda in the Washington Post. He's one of my favorite book critics, along with Steve Donahue. And he really highly recommended this. I guess the Economist for a long time took a lot of pride in writing these really clever and original literary obituaries for people. So these are not like your typical obituaries at all. And I haven't read all these. I'm probably going to take this one really slow. Maybe read an obituary every day. Okay, here's the first one. Red Adair. Paul Neal, Red Adair, firefighter, died on August 7th, 2004, aged 89. As he flew into Kuwait in March 1992, Red Adair could see nothing. The sky was filled with black smoke to a height of 15,000 feet, and it was impossible to tell what was north, south, east, or west. The smoke came from burning oil fields, sabotaged by Saddam Hussein as his troops retreated. Each day, 5 M barrels worth $150 million were going up in flames. From the crater that was Kuwait City's airport, Mr. Adair surveyed the scene. The horizon was filled with one continuous fire. At the core of the wells, the temperature was 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, or about the heat necessary to melt steel. On the ground, 50 feet away, it was still close to 1,000 degrees. The fires were often not shooting up straight from the wellhead, but spewing out in all directions. Mr. Adair and his men donned their overalls, discarded their plastic hats and favored aluminum, and set about doing their job. Red, by the way, was 75. Okay, I'm going to stop there, but that's really interesting. Red Adair. You know, the first bar that I ever hung out at as a regular was called Adair Saloon. It's in Deep Ellum, Texas. Deep Ellum is actually a neighborhood in Dallas, and it's a great bar. They serve beer in a can, including Lone Star, Pearl Black. Pearl in a can, anyway, great bar. They encouraged you to write graffiti on the walls, and they had absolutely terrific live music every single night. Live country western music every single night. And they didn't pay much, so it's kind of a place where people got experience playing. And I saw 1100 Springs, the first year that they got together, go from a little nobody band that nobody paid any attention to at all to packing the place. If you wanted a place to sit down, you had to get there 2 hours early. Does this Red Adair, is he related to Lois and the folks at Adair Saloon in Dallas? I don't know. It's a really old bar. I mean, it was open in the 60s. It's a different location then. I suspect they probably are related somehow, but I don't know. I'll have to read the rest of the obituary to find out, I guess. Now, I have another book here for summer sport. And I tell you, this was an epic book. All these are a lot of books. This is called The Celebrant by Eric Rolfe Greenberg. Okay. And I do remember who recommended this. Thank you, Will Roby, for recommending this. My friend Will Roby is one of my favorite people. I gave him his first job. We've been friends for 20 years. A lot of you know that I've been sober for, 11 years now. But he presented me with my 9-year chip. I have someone different present me with a chip every year, and that year it was Will Roby. But anyway, he's the one who recommended this to me for summer sport. It's a baseball novel. Don't know anything about it, but if Will Roby says it's good to read, I'm going to read it because Will Roby is an intelligent and discerning reader, if nothing else. Chapter 1. Our family came to New York in the winter of '89, and in the spring, I saw my first game of baseball. I was 8. My mother's brother, a jeweler, had preceded us across the Atlantic. Uncle Sid's family was small, only 4 children. But the crowding was awful, and in April, my father thought to find a place of our own across the river in Brooklyn. He inquired of a German-speaking landlord near Prospect Park who asked if there were children. My father answered 9. The German nodded, and the two men shook hands. The following Sunday, we stacked all we owned onto a rented dray and, daunted by the spectacular height of the new bridge, crossed the river by ferry. We returned before nightfall, much abashed. The German had understood my father to say he had no children, and when he arrived with 9, the door was slammed in his face. Okay, this sounds good. I'm looking forward to that. Okay, the next one is Ghost Story by Peter Straub. Okay, I've read this before too. I read it a long time ago. But Peter Straub, British horror writer, worked a little bit with Stephen King. He's terrific. Ghost Story is a terrific novel. This was made into a movie with Fred Astaire in one of the roles of one of the characters. But I love the first opening. The opening to this is terrific. It's legendary. Okay, so this is from chapter 1, from the prologue. What was the worst thing you've ever done? I won't tell you that, but I'll tell you the worst thing that ever happened to me. The most dreadful thing. Okay, now that's a good lead. It's got me wondering. Don't you want to know what the most dreadful thing was? I do. Next, The Sportswriter by Richard Ford, which is not part of Summer of Sport, okay? I don't know what this is part of. I think someone told me that Richard Ford was a really good writer and compared him with somebody. I don't remember who. But Richard Ford has won a Pulitzer, but not for this. He won it for Independence Day, which I don't know anything about. And I don't know anything about this book other than it was recommended to me, and it was not recommended to me as a sports novel. It was recommended to me as literature fiction. Okay, this is from chapter 1. My name is Frank Bascom. I am a sports writer. For the past 14 years, I have lived here at 19 Hoving Road, Haddam, New Jersey, in a large Tudor house bought when a book of short stories I wrote sold to a movie producer for a lot of money, and seemed to set my wife and me and our 3 children, 2 of whom were not even born yet, up for a good life. Okay, sounds good to me. Next up, I've got a fantasy here, okay, and this was recommended as something that fans of J.R.R. Tolkien would like. It's called The Lions of Al-Rassan, and I'm probably mispronouncing that. It's by Guy Gavriel Kay, okay? So I don't know much about this other than it's a fantasy, and it's obviously clearly not going to be, a British fantasy that sounds as familiar as The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. Okay, but here's the first paragraph from the prologue. It was past midday, not long before the 3rd summons to prayer, that Amr ibn Kairan passed through the Gare of the Bells and entered the palace of Al-Fontina in Silverines to kill the last of the Caliph of Al-Rassan. Okay, this one will require some attention on my part because it's a little bit foreign to me, okay? I don't have any prejudices against anybody from different cultures, but sometimes when someone from a different culture has written a work of literature, I have to pay a little more attention to it than I would something I'm more familiar with. That's all right, though. I don't have a problem with that. And yes, we are getting close to the end of my most epic book haul ever. I've got Zen in the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Remember, I promised that I would have more to say about this, and I do. This is by Robert M. Persick. This is a lovely edition. It's not the edition that I read when I was younger, but that's okay. It's gone with all the rest of my book collection. I told you what happened to the rest of that book collection a little while ago. So, woe is me, right? So, here we go. This is the introduction. We're going to skip the introduction, and I suggest skipping the introduction for every book that you ever read. Once somebody spoiled a major plot point for me in an introduction to a book, the author of the book, no less, I decided, you know what, I'm skipping introductions from now on, and I'll come back and read the introduction after I've actually read the book. This is from part 1, page 1. I can see by my watch, without taking my hand from the left grip of the cycle, that it is 8:30 in the morning. The wind, even at 60 miles an hour, is warm and humid. When it's this hot, muggy at 8:30, I'm wondering what it's going to be like in the afternoon. In the wind are pungent odors from the marshes by the road. We're in an area of the Central Plains filled with thousands of duck hunting sloughs heading northwest from Minneapolis toward the Dakotas. This highway is an old concrete two-laner that hasn't had much traffic since a four-laner went in parallel to it several years ago. When we pass a marsh, the air suddenly becomes cooler. Then, when we are past, it suddenly warms up again. I can't say enough about how much I like this book. That may not be immediately apparent why from the first couple of paragraphs, but then again it might. It depends on you and what you like. Also, I've got some events coming up that I'm really looking forward to that I'm really excited about. In fact, August is an event that a lot of people call the best event on BookTube, and it is affectionately referred to as Garbagas. And it's a month where we're encouraged to read trashy novels or trashy books. This includes things like men's adventures novels, and it also includes things where, sex is important or trashy romance novels or whatever. Usually I go lean more towards the men's adventure side of things because that's easier for me to relate to and I just like it. But this year I thought I'd do something a little different, at least with some of the books. And I have got here my first book for Garbagas, The Happy Hooker by Xavier Hollander. If you're of a certain age, you'll remember seeing this at the bookstore all the time. And I think I'm going to read the first paragraph of this, but I'm not 100% sure because I haven't read it before, and I don't know if it's appropriate for BookTubers. So let me take a look at it real quick. Okay, it looks okay. It says here, almost from the moment we were herded into the crowded cattle pen of a prison cell in New York's infamous Tombs, the jail-roughened black hookers gave us nothing but misery. Okay, I don't know much about what this is about, but I have a feeling I'm going to like it just because it's going to be fun. And I also got another book. This one's by Jacqueline Suzanne, who wrote The Valley of the Dolls, and it's called The Love Machine. And I don't know, the description I read of it was that it was just like The Valley of Dolls. It just had a different title and slightly different plots. But anyway, this is from part one, Amanda. Monday, March 1960. At 9 in the morning, she was standing on the steps in front of the Plaza Hotel, shivering in a linen dress. One of the clothespins that held the back of the dress together clattered to the ground. A dresser hurried to replace it, and the photographer had the time to reload his camera. The hairdresser quickly retouched a few stray hairs with a can of hairspray, and the session resumed. The curious crowd that had gathered was delighted with the glimpse of one of the beautiful people, a top fashion model facing the blasting cold winds of March in a lightweight summer dress. To add to the strangeness of the scene, there was cold-looking snowbanks on the hills of Central Park, reminders of a recent snowstorm. The crowd, comfortably bundled in winter coats, suddenly felt no envy for the shimmering creature they were watching, who earned more money in a morning than they earned in a week. Okay, and so that's it. That is the most epic book haul I've ever had. So there's a lot of books here. This is probably about 30 books. These probably cost an average of $20 each. This is probably a $600 book haul. Man like me, that's a lot of money. Anyway, you'll be hearing more about these books as the next few months go along because I'm planning to read all of them. I'm not going to waste money on books I'm not going to read. And I just want to pass along a couple of things to you before I move on. If you like this video, I've got 225 other videos on here that you might like. If you're watching it far in the future, there might be a lot more than 225 other videos. I don't know. Stick around a while. Find my channel, look through the videos, see if there's something else there that might interest you. If you watch this one this long, you evidently like the kind of content that I produce, and I thank you so much for it. Other than that, I just want to tell you the same thing I always tell you folks. Stay sexy, stay hydrated, and I'll see you in the next video.